Laura Spence, and we're here at the St. Petersburg Grand Prix to learn about the STEM of racing. In our district, we are focusing on STEM education, getting the kids involved in STEM careers. How is STEM involved in what you do every single day?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a lot of technology involved in racing, and for us race car drivers, we rely a lot on the technology to do its thing and do it well. And there's a lot of obviously young kids that come to events like this and see what racing's all about, and then they get into engineering, and then next thing you know, they become team members and high-end mechanics and engineers, and help us make those cars faster.
How did you get involved in what you're doing?
I'd say pretty easily that I fairly much grew up on the racetrack because my dad was racing back in Europe, in France in particular, and I had first motorcycle I was 3 years old, and then go-karts I was 10, and then things got a little bit more serious over the years, and in the meantime my mom was a teacher, so school was very important. So I also have a science degree, but it was an interesting time when I started to get into a parallel cursus of having fairly high studies, and in the meantime getting very close to being a professional race car driver. So at some point I had to choose, but
you ready?
I did enjoy the challenge.
So you're local to Pinellas County, so how did you pick this area of Florida?
It was actually the very first race that I did as a professional in Champ cars back then. It was actually here in 2003, and it was the return of the Grand Prix after many years of absence. And it just turned out to come from Miami, where we spent 6 months with my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, and we came over the bridge and just looked at the scenery, and we're like, wow, that place is just awesome. And we got to spend a bit of time looking around, and we're really amazed. And she got a full scholarship to study at USF, and there we were.
For a lot of our students that are trying to find a STEM career that they have a passion for, what are some aspects of your job that you could see our students helping with?
I think, like I said, there's so much. It's such a sport where you see the car and the driver, but there's so much behind the scene. You have, anywhere between 20 and 50 people in every team, making sure that car runs, and the parallels between the studies, and you can go anywhere from communication, putting the event together, behind the scene marketing, sales, engineering, and everything else. There's really a lot of paths and avenues, and I think if you have any passion for racing or cars in general, you can definitely find your way in the racing world.
So you can see there's tons of STEM in the racing industry, especially here at the St. Petersburg Grand Prix. We're in the paddock area at the St. Petersburg Grand Prix. Let's meet a driver that's committed to STEM education.
My name is Dalton Kellett. I drive the number 67 K-Line Insulators USA and 1080 Education Indy Lights car with Pinellas Racing. I myself, I have an engineering degree, so I love anything we can do to use racing to promote STEM and get out there and kind of spread that message. And specifically what I do as the driver is, I obviously drive the race car, but then I have to take the feedback that I feel how the car's handling and all that and relay that to my engineers. So we're always working with STEM professionals, whether it's race engineers, mechanics, engine engineers, and all that. There's a lot of STEM work that goes on to make the race car go fast.
Now, you mentioned something about 1080 Education. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So 1080 Education is one of my partners. I'm a brand spokesperson for their program. They're a project-based learning STEM charity, and they basically run events, and a race program specifically is what I'm tied with, the National STEM League. And it's similar in scope and organization to Formula SAE at the collegiate level, but it's using remote control cars, and the students design them, but they get kind of a stock chassis, but they can take that and modify it, design it, and they have to present engineering reports, and they race against other schools, and they have a national championship every year.
So when you go out and speak to students at different schools throughout the country, what's a main message that you'd like to share with them?
I think the big thing for me is, from my experience as an athlete and a student, there were a lot of people saying that you've taken on too much, it's going to be too hard to do engineering and racing at the same time. And I was able to prove them wrong, and I got my degree in 4 years while racing cars at a professional level. So I think one of the big things that I try to say to students is that you can not to be afraid of setting lofty goals for yourself, and really if it's something that you're passionate about and something that you really want to achieve, you can almost always do it. Basically what we're going to do here is we're going to take the settings that the engineers have come up for the springs and suspension and all that. Mechanics are going to use our reference pad and set the car up for the track here. So it's a bumpy track, we're going to have a little more ride height, softer springs and all that. If we actually come and look at the car, you can see we've got our Cooper rain tires on here, so we use these for travel with the tread. So that there's a little more ride height so we can get in the trailer, but once we actually get on track, we'll be using slick tires that are smooth, like the ones on that car there. And the reason for that is that you've got more surface area in contact with the road, so you get more grip. These rain tires are good for when it's wet because the water can get pushed out of the side. If you look, the first thing you notice with these cars, we have wings, unlike most road cars. What that does, it's basically an inverted airfoil, so it produces downforce, not lift in a downward direction. So it's like an airplane flipped upside down, and that basically presses the car down onto the ground, increases the normal force of the contact patch without adding weight, so you don't add inertia to the car. That lets you corner faster. The motor, it's an inline 4-cylinder, 2-liter displacement, 500 horsepower total with a 50 horsepower, or 450 horsepower with a 50 horsepower push pass, so 500. Look at the cockpit here. This isn't the actual steering wheel. We have a real wheel with a dash and a lot more buttons and everything. This is just for travel. But if you look inside the cockpit, you can see we have a 6-point harness that holds the driver, holds me into the car. You can see the seat is custom molded to my body, so we actually take a mold of me in the sitting position, and then they cut these seats with a CNC machine, stitch them together, cover them in fireproof fabric, and they're actually designed to absorb energy in the event of a crash.
And what's the exterior of your car made out of?
So the whole car, the whole chassis, the tub, all the bodywork, the panels, the wings, it's all made out of carbon fiber, so it's a composite material, so you have the lightweight and stiffness that you'd get with, say, aerospace grade aluminum, but you also have the impact resistance of a polymer with the epoxy that's used to bond the fibers together. So it's very tough, but also very light. And the suspension is made out of a steel alloy that's welded. You can see the joints there. And for both us and IndyCar, all the suspension components are either steel or aluminum. The uprights are machined aluminum. The covers are carbon fiber. We also have, see here, we have safety tethers on the wheel made out of Kevlar. So if all these pieces break, this strap, it will still attach to the car on a hard point, and that'll keep the wheel from flying off. And then the side of the car, the black carbon fiber piece here, is called the underwing. So if you were to section kind of the middle of the side pod in a side view, you'd actually see a big airfoil. So the whole underside of the car is one big kind of Venturi tunnel shape, and as the air goes in, that kind of swoopy section there, it accelerates under the car, gets ejected under the wing, and that creates, as the air accelerates along that path, it creates suction, which then pulls the car down onto the ground. So it's basically another wing. So most of the downforce comes from the bottom of the car. The wings are really more just for tuning.
So, I mean, you have a lot of experience racing, but it sounds like your educational background really enhances what you're doing. Do you agree?
I would certainly agree. It gives me a level of understanding that's a little beyond just the basic kind of, the main benefit for me is that when I'm dealing with the engineers, when we're testing, I can relate to them on a technical level. And most guys, it's more pronounced at a lower formula. Once you get to Indy Lights, IndyCar level, all the drivers, you really need to have a very strong technical background. But I still think I have a little bit of an edge. I noticed that little bit more.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.